Democratic candidate for governor, and it's great to be here. So this is part of our Town Square campaign where we're going to just go out and talk to people, talk about issues, answer questions, but I think one of the most important things you can do in a campaign is actually listen. And so if folks have ideas, I want to hear them. And I had asked Bill Lee, the Republican candidate, invited him to join us, and actually he sent me a very gracious note today, email saying he can't because he has his own scheduling issues, which I totally accept, but we'll have chances to be together in the future. And I want to recognize a few folks before we get started. We have Rachel Mackey is here from running for the State House, 44. Ali, who I've seen, is here from the vice chair of the county party, Len, who got such an enthusiastic welcome to the program. And Gallatin Mayor Paige Brown is here with us too. Being mayor is the best job in America, so I hope you're enjoying it. Yeah, thank you. So let me just talk a little bit about my thoughts on education and where I come from on this issue. Education played a significant role in my life, as it did, I'm sure, in everybody's life here. When I look back at where I've been, where I'm going, and who I am, educators and public education that I received played a huge part of that. And then going on to college and law school was significant. But when I think about education, probably the key experience in my life in terms of forming my thoughts about education was the fact that I spent about 15 years of my life as a public defender. I'm sure most of you know by now, since you've heard me talk endlessly, that when I got out of law school, after Ann and I got married, I joined the public defender's office as an assistant and did that work for 6 or 7 years, and then I ran for public defender and was reelected a couple times. But the big thing that, I observed a lot, and I learned a lot about poverty, I learned a lot about drug addiction, I learned a lot about alcoholism. But the thing that really came home to me was that my clients were about 95% high school dropouts. One of the first things you ask when you're representing somebody is you want to understand what their education level is so that you're explaining things properly, making sure that they understand what their rights are, and understanding what they understand. And so you ask almost immediately, how far did you go in school? And it was just constantly 10th grade, 9th grade, and very few people had completed school. And then I did a lot of work with juveniles. And my juvenile clients, which really disturbed me, were leaving school when they were 12, 13, 14. I mean, they just stopped going. They just stopped showing up. And nothing good would come from that, and you knew it would end in a sad way, and lots of times it did. And so that gave me this sense that if I had a chance to work on education, which I did when I was mayor, that would be the focus of my time in office, and I tried to make it that. I made education my top priority as mayor. I felt that it was the one thing that we had to do as a city to move Nashville forward. And so during the Great Recession, which occurred about 7 or 8 months after I became mayor, and not because I became mayor, we worked to maintain the school budget and to try to put more money there. And then as I went into finished my first term and the second term began and the boom in the city began, we were able to do more. We increased school budgets by about 37%. We did, I think, $620 million in capital programs for schools. We moved starting teacher pay from 30th in the state to 3rd. I also sort of embraced the idea that we needed to work on education reform, think of doing things different ways. I'm absolutely convinced that we had this responsibility because kids, only get one shot at the 3rd grade. I mean, they're only 10, they're only 11, they're only 12 once. And it's our responsibility as adults to try to make that as the most worthwhile experience that we can, and that's what drove me. And then entering this race, I still believe that education needs to be our top priority. When I look at our state and I think about where we're going, I think everything that we need to accomplish, whether it's doing better with our health, whether it's doing better in terms of public safety, whether it's doing better in terms of attracting jobs, or whether it's just seeing our kids and our grandkids succeed, that is all tied to high quality public education. And we as a state need to keep that as a budgetary priority. I give credit to Bill Haslam, I give credit to Phil Bredesen for both working on this issue very strongly and being nonpartisan about it and caring about it. We've had two good education governors in a row, and we have got to keep that commitment. We have made progress, but we are not where we need to be. We still need to do better. And so when I look at things, when I think about where we are as a state, and I look at our future, and I think about economic development and the jobs that we can bring here, and people always ask me, do you support incentives, and always ask those questions. I don't think incentives are the big issue for the state going forward. The big issue for the state going forward is going to be workforce development. We are such an attractive state for businesses to come to. We are in terms of our fiscal conservatism, the way our state has been managed, the beautiful weather here, our central location, we're going to do very well in attracting business. But our only thing that can stand in our way will be if we fail to have the people trained, going to college, having the technical background they need to take those jobs. And if we miss that opportunity, it will be our own fault. And so that, to me, is key. And so I think we need to be a state that produces not only more college graduates, but we also got to recognize that not everyone will go to college, and we need to make sure we have the community college programs, the technical programs, and the vocational programs in our public schools that allows for everybody to get ahead and to get a job that pays more than the minimum wage, where people can raise a family. To me, that is absolutely key. I'm also very much convinced that it's important for us to pay our teachers more. I can tell you, as I have traveled the state, one of the things that I have heard uniformly, but for different reasons in every part of the state, is the need for better teacher pay. Specifically, when I'm in Memphis, I talk to teachers and to providers of STEM programs, math and science, and they say their number one challenge is that they are losing teachers to the private sector because of pay. You go to a small town or a rural community which are facing real challenges in Tennessee, and they say, look, we finally get a great science teacher, we get a great math teacher, and then a suburban county or an urban county comes along and offers $10,000 more, and we lose them. And then you come to the eastern part of the state, or even the northern part of the state, where Kentucky takes our teachers, and Georgia is paying $10,000 more, and we're losing our teachers. I believe the magic happens in the classroom, and it happens when you got a great teacher who can motivate kids, who can inspire them to learn. And if you want the best, and we want the best, you got to pay people. And I think that is absolutely critical for us moving forward, and that's what I intend to do. I think as a state, we have got to say that, again, education is the priority. And so the way I look at it as mayor, and the way I look at it as governor, is when you're cutting up the budgetary pie, you make the pieces bigger for the things that you think are important, and you protect what you think is important. I think education is so key to the future of our state that that's what I protect. And that's what I'll do every day that I'm in that office. I'd be happy to answer questions or take comments. Yeah?
What about Tea and Ready?
Tea and Ready is on everybody's mind these days. Well, I think clearly, it's been very disappointing that the tests haven't come off the way people had wanted them to do. I'm sure it is an enormous frustration to everybody involved that we've had we've had to cancel. We had vendor problems. We've had mechanical problems. We've had administrative problems. And there's this sense that there's a growing, I guess I'd say, cynicism or skepticism from people from parents and from teachers who think that we might not be able to rely on these, and they question whether they're going to be accurate or not. I understand that and I hear that. But I do believe it's important that we don't abandon our efforts to have a measurement of how we're doing, that we continue to say that we're going to determine whether we're making progress, we're going to know whether we're doing better so that we can change the curriculum if we need to, and that testing is part of that. I don't think we pause. I don't think we stop. I think as a state we can get it done. And if that means we got to get a new vendor, if that means we got to do whatever we have to do, we can do it. But Tennessee needs to be a state that is moving forward with that type of testing and continuing it. There are other testing we may need to look at. Maybe we're testing too much, but we've got to have a benchmark like Tennessee Ready, in my opinion. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to know your views on the environment, because I feel like the last 8 years the environment has been like.
I think, I believe in global warming. Let me just say that. But that's kind of. I think that's such a clear thing. It's kind of as a joke, but my wife Ann is here. Ann has worked as an environmental lawyer and was actually started the Tennessee office for the Southern Environmental Law Center. One of the things that I have enjoyed in this campaign, I'm not going to say I enjoyed every minute I've spent in Interstate 40, but I average probably 25, 30 hours a week in a car. But this is a really beautiful state. It is a state from one end to the other that has unique geography. It's a state that has very great natural beauty and great natural assets. And people move to this state and come to this state and continue to live here because people enjoy the climate, they enjoy the outdoors, and we got to protect that. One of the things we have to do as a state is make sure that we maintain our high quality of life, and I don't think that that's inconsistent with being pro-business. I think I'm a pro-business person. I like seeing job creation. I like opportunities to be created. But I think we got to recognize that one of our assets, one of the reasons people locate in Tennessee is because they can come here and fish and hunt and bike and kayak and swim and boat and do everything. And to do that, you got to preserve, you got to conserve, and you got to be thoughtful about it. Those things are important. I don't think clean air and clean water are partisan issues.
We moved here about 30 years ago, and the first thing we moved from Kentucky, and the first thing I noticed was how much litter was all over the side of the road. And for the last 8 years before this, it was, report litter, do all this. Now you haven't been mentioned in 8 years. So throw everything out the window. Who cares?
No, I certainly would share your concern about litter, and I promise that I will mention litter during my time as governor. It's important. People want that.
Well, it's very noticeable when you come to the state. It's like, oh, Lord, my state does not look like this.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Where are you with health care?
Well, I think healthcare on two levels is a huge issue for our state and for our country. I think the most immediate issue here in Tennessee is the need to do Medicaid expansion. I think that is absolutely critical. As I look at that issue, and you think back to when that decision was made by the legislature, which I think is probably one of the worst mistakes the legislature's ever made, is not doing that. You look back at that decision, that was a highly partisan, highly political decision. And the approach I want to take to being governor is I want to be a pragmatic person. I want to be a person with common sense. I want to try to do things and work on issues that will move our state forward. To me, it's not about party. It's about how do Tennesseans live better lives and how do we live healthier lives. So by not doing the Medicaid expansion, we have lost about $4 billion in money that could have been used to give people access to health care. We have put ourselves in a position where our tax dollars go to states that do Medicaid expansion. We don't get the money. We get less Medicaid money than other states. We have put ourselves where we're not competitive. If you're a private hospital company, and Middle Tennessee is filled with private hospital companies, we're sort of the Silicon Valley of this stuff. If you're a private hospital company and you're going to make a $500 million investment to build a new hospital, you're not going to build a hospital in a state where you're not going to get proper reimbursement. It's just not going to happen. And they're going to go to other states and they're going to make those investments. It's good. And you've seen around our state, particularly in rural and small town Tennessee, where the failure to do Medicaid expansion has resulted in 11 hospitals closing now. And, you know, we're blessed here in Middle Tennessee. I mean, we've got lots of hospitals around us. We've got great medical care that's available. But there are lots of parts of the state where the hospitals have closed, and the nearest hospital is 35 or 45 minutes away. And you think of the human aspect of this. You think about the person who has the heart attack, the person or the family member, if you have to watch this, has the heart attack or has appendicitis, or your daughter breaks her leg playing soccer, and it's 35 to 45 minutes to get to a hospital. And what does that do to a town? It makes it that much harder to keep your residents there. It makes it that much harder to recruit new people, and it makes it that much harder to attract business. You know, the state of Virginia did Medicaid expansion 3 months ago, and it still helps financially. It's still in our best interest to do it. The state of Indiana, when Governor Pence was governor of Indiana, and Governor Pence, all due respect, he's no liberal. I mean, you know, he's Vice President Pence. They did the Medicaid expansion because it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing for their citizens, and it's the right thing for our citizens. So that's where I stand on that. Yes, sir.
I think the invasive species out there in the Tennessee River and the Cumberland River and a few other places in this state are going to put some of our financial economic sector at pretty good risk in the near future. Are you aware of that, and would you be willing to work with Kentucky or do anything to address this?
Yeah, I'm aware of it. I mean, I'm certainly aware of the carp situation in particular, and there are other invasive species that are constantly threatening our waterways and the waterways of our country, who come in through you know, ships that come down the St. Lawrence Seaway or come into other harbors and get into our rivers and streams. Certainly, you know, if you go to West Tennessee in particular, up in Lake County and places that have had a fairly strong tourist economy built around fishing and outdoor sports events, boating, they have been heavily impacted by this carp issue. And I'm anxious to work with the federal government and others to do whatever we can to keep our waterways free of those type of species that hurt tourism, hurt quality of life, take away jobs. Those are important issues. Yes, sir.
I'll just say this and leave you with it, and you can answer it as you will. You know, at what point do we become responsible for our own actions? If you go back almost 60 years, somebody said, ask not what the government can do for you, but what you can do for the government. Mm-hmm. Life has changed since then. Would you agree with that? It's changed dramatically. And so I'm not looking for anything. I'm just looking for things to be returned. And I think that we all have, you know, an obligation to do for ourselves and
right.
not look towards somebody else to do it for us. We should all be self-independent and self-sufficient. Would you agree with that?
Well, I'll be happy to respond. I certainly think that taking care of yourself and having personal responsibility is absolutely critical. But let me look at it in a couple ways. First, I'll go back to the quote. That was John F. Kennedy's remarks in 1961 when he was sworn in as president, and he said in his inaugural address, "Ask not what you can do for your country, but what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." And I think there he was challenging Americans to step up and to work hard to help their country get better, become a better place to live. I don't think he was saying that everybody had to be totally independent or totally free of any aid from the government. Because you could go back certainly to the 1930s, and where President Kennedy was a young person, when this country went through a Great Depression, and there were people who were out of jobs, and millions of people, and we worked as a country together to bring people back out of that terrible economic event. And it took people working together and helping one another and recognizing our sort of interconnectedness.
Sure, and if you go back before that, there was no fraud. It was done on a local level. If you needed help, you went to the church. The church would help you. It was in your community. People knew
right,
that.
but I think what the problem was that when you get into the 20th century, and I don't mean to debate history, but when you had the Great Depression, And one of the reactions of Herbert Hoover, who was then the president, was that the government shouldn't do anything, that private charity, churches, everybody should take care of it. And then you have all these people who aren't getting fed, and there's not enough resources to help everybody. And when people needed help, the government stepped up. Now, it's better, at some point, you don't want people to get dependent on government aid. But there are times in, like kids who have no money, or poor kids, or kids that don't have parents, they need our help.
And I just throw out so many examples. My mother's been in school for 4 years, and other people, and I know, it's like that. There's parents that don't care, and, we donate shoes and clothes and stuff like that, and coats in the wintertime. What I don't want to get into is that, I don't want to have something sold off on this state that we all can't pay for. And would you agree? I think we have to do what we want to have brought forward. And if we want to live that way, it's up to us. And we have to push it forward. Would you agree with that?
To a degree, I get your point. But I do think that we are a society where there's certain, I believe in capitalism, I believe in the free market, but I also believe that there are times when the government has to play a role helping people. And there's areas in healthcare, there's areas in education, there's areas with the people who are aged, there are people who have disabilities, people who cannot care for themselves, and government has that role. Yes, ma'am.
Speaking of people who can't care for themselves, what are some of your plans to bring jobs to rural areas?
Well, I think what we need to do is, you look at Tennessee right now, and you look at Middle Tennessee where we are. Unemployment rate in Nashville in this area is, 2.1, 2.4%. You got similar prosperity in Chattanooga and Knoxville. The cities are doing well. There are parts of rural Tennessee that are struggling, that lost jobs in the 80s and 90s, the apparel industry and things like that. I think what we need to do is to concentrate our economic development energies on those parts of the state that need the help the most. I'm not saying we ignore Nashville or we ignore Sumner County. If there's something great that's going on, the state needs to play a role and we need to be helpful. But right now, we need to focus our attentions on the places where the jobs aren't and where they need to be. We need to help get things moving. I think to do that, you work with the local government, you work with the people there to find out what they see as their strengths, what they want to accomplish, and then we should work to try to elevate that. Whether it's farming, whether it's factory work, or whether it's investing in the outdoor economy. There are lots of parts of the state where there's huge opportunities in the outdoor economy. But that's where our attention should be. I think rural broadband's a big part of it. I think education is a key part of it, because you have rural communities that struggle with education because they don't have a tax base at all. You look at Sumner County, Davidson County, we got more malls and stores and car dealerships than we can deal with. There are some counties that don't have any of that. And they're not getting any sales tax revenue, and they probably need some help.
And as some of those counties grow, though, some of us want to move to the lesser counties. And I'll say this, you're talking about jobs and everything else. Look at that. For disabled veteran, I can get a job, so can anybody else.
All right. Well,
You want to address that? It just...
I'm trying to address it. And
Look, though, I just want to say, you can't sell votes. People have to step up. It's not what you do, it's what the people do. And they want you, they just want to get somebody in there and get what... Sometimes you have to eat a bad sandwich to have a good salad. Would you agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that. I don't think you have to eat a bad sandwich. I'm not eating a bad sandwich.
No, I'm just saying you've had your time. There's more people need questions.
I won't say anything else.
Okay, thank you.
All right, sir.
Can you talk about the opioid problem? It's Tennessee, it's nationwide probably. What about Tennessee?
Yeah, I think the opioid issue in Tennessee obviously is a crisis, and I think I give Governor Haslam credit for putting more money into treatment, which I think is absolutely key and is a start, and we need to continue to do more and to try to build that up. I think we were hurt partially with that, with not doing the Medicaid expansion because we didn't have the treatment facilities that were available. I think we need to do more in terms of we got to monitor prescription abuse. The legislature took some actions in this most recent session. We'll see how that plays out. Public education's key, and I think you got to empower the police and law enforcement. People are selling fentanyl and heroin. Those things, people are making money off that, hurting people, and obviously people got to be prosecuted for that. But the key is treatment. I mean, we're not going to prosecute our way out of this. We got to make sure treatment's available and the people can get it.
I got a
And,
question on that, 'cause my wife is India. She dropped her leg at 14. That's 45 years ago. But she has a lot of pain.
right?
Her pain clinic is just every, you can't come to see us every 60 days. Now you gotta come to see us every 30 days. How do I plan my life? If I've gotta be in Sumner County every 30 days, and her prescriptions have to be hand delivered to the pharmacy.
Right.
I mean, it's good to have controls, but let's be.
No, that's a good question. I mean, I think what you're going to see now as these laws go into effect about controlling prescription abuse, there are going to be some folks who have legitimate conditions and pains where it's going to be more difficult for them to get the treatment that they need, and we're going to have to revisit it. I mean, I think you have to work with the doctors, and you have to figure out what the best way to do it is. I don't think it would be possible to get it all right the first time, and we got to have an open mind about that.
You're gonna see suicides.
Yeah, it's a real issue, and I think people are aware of it. It's not something that you can solve
I'm
quickly.
talking about people who are diligent in controlling it. They're not trying to get out. They're never gonna get their pain gone. It's just diminishes the pain.
Right. I agree. I understand what you're saying exactly. Yes, sir.
Change the subject a little bit. I'm a little concerned about transportation. I think Tennessee's getting more and more populated, and we're having more and more traffic problems. I was fortunate enough to go to England and jump the ride on their railroad. And they were going 100 miles an hour down the railroad.
Yeah.
On the railroad. And I couldn't hear the train hitting the tracks. I mean, it was so quiet and so smooth. And I said, what causes what? I looked, and instead of having pine rails, they had concrete, and they had welded these tracks in a U shape configuration that allowed for contraction, for changing temperature, and stabilized the tracks. It made them smooth. You could not hear. You're going 100 miles an hour. You could not hear the wheels hitting the tracks like you could in here. And I think that if we would look and explore how these other countries have been able to build and improvements that we can do, we could not only say these were electrical engines. They weren't diesel. We could save on power. We could save the environment, and we could move people at a tremendous speed and get some traffic off the interstates, and maybe we could get from point A to point B in a reasonable amount of time.
I think that's a good comment. I mean, obviously, Middle Tennessee is sort of ground zero on traffic and transportation issues. And I think one of the things we definitely need, and I worked on this when I was mayor, helping to create the mayor's caucus, is that we got to look for regional solutions. That, we got to make sure that people are able to move about the state and move about the regions of the state, and our economy works. And I think the state has to play a stronger leadership role than it's played in the past, and I'm very interested in doing that.
Mayor, this is going to be our last question, so maybe we can have one on education. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us here tonight. Does anybody have a question on education?
I do. What about school vouchers?
Well, I'm opposed to school vouchers. I think school vouchers, my sense of school vouchers is, what that does is that takes money out of the public school system and puts it into private school systems that you don't know. Number one, you're not sure what you're getting, but it actually does undermine public education in my mind. And so that's where I certainly draw a line there. I think public charter schools have played a role in Nashville and Memphis and in cities where there have been some real issues about underserved kids and quality of schools, and they've done some good work. and I've supported that. I don't think that's a solution that is going to be statewide. I don't think it's a solution that really has much of a role outside of major cities, but I do think it has played a role in Nashville and Memphis. And when I say public, these are schools that are public schools that are basically responding to the board and receive public funding. I am opposed to for-profit charter schools, which are illegal in Tennessee. We don't have those. All right, well, let me thank you all. This is a beautiful night. It's only going to get better as we go into November because it's going to get cooler. And the campaign is going to get more exciting, and we're going to win.